Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a thriller series called Bodyguard. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The show opens with a man named David Budd on a train in London, accompanied by his 2 kids. Moments later, he notices a strange man discarding his phone in the trash and entering the toilet. He also sees a female train guard who appears to be very anxious. She goes on to check on the man in the toilet, but he doesn't respond. Seeing this, David asks a passenger to look after his kids and heads to talk to the guard. He introduces himself as a police officer and asks what is going on. The woman explains that she's terrified because they have received information that a terrorist is on this train. She believes the man in the toilet is a threat, as he has been acting very suspiciously. Alarmed, David decides to confront the suspect and requests that the guard unlock the doors. He plans to push him out an open door if he emerges with a bomb. However, moments later, the man exits without any device and casually returns to his seat. After a sigh of relief, David enters the toilet to see if the man has placed a device there. However, he is surprised to discover a terrified woman with a bomb around her waist. David senses that she is scared and doesn't want to do this, so he talks to her. The woman reveals her name is Nadia, and the suspicious man from before is her husband. Nadia attempts to detonate the device, but David intervenes and calms her down. He tells her about his time as a military officer in Afghanistan and how terrorism and violence never end well. He then asks her to abandon the mission and promises to protect her from her husband. Anything to prevent another red wedding. Shortly after, the train comes to a stop and several police officers board. They are about to shoot Nadia, but David stops them and reveals that she is willing to surrender. She eventually emerges from the toilet, after which an officer defuses the bomb and removes it from her waist. Following this, Nadia's husband is arrested and she is taken into police custody for questioning. In the next scene, David takes his kids and drops them off at his ex-wife Vicky's house. After putting the kids to sleep, the two talk for a while, and Vicky invites him to spend the night. David then attempts to kiss her, but she immediately rejects him, stating she didn't mean it that way. What way did she mean it then? This frustrates David so much that he abruptly leaves the house. The following morning, David is summoned by his boss, who praises him for what he did on the train. She also offers him the position of bodyguard to Home Secretary Julia Montague, who is running for Prime Minister. David gladly accepts the job and returns home, where he does some research on Julia Montague. He discovers that she is very supportive of military action overseas. This upsets David a bit, as he's still dealing with PTSD from his time in Afghanistan. The next day, David arrives for his first day of work as Julia's bodyguard and greets her. He advises her to enter the minister's building through the underground entrance for her safety. However, Julia appears uninterested and walks away without responding. David then follows her around while she works and takes her home at the end of the day. During the drive, he suggests that the driver take a different route because the current one appears to be unsafe. His interference annoys Julia, but he states that he's just trying to keep her safe. He also calls her Marm a lot, which is funny and distracting. When they arrive at Julia's home, he begins to inspect each room for potential security threats. This annoys her once again, and she asks him to leave, but David explains that he is simply doing his job. Moments later, Julia reads his report and realizes that he was the one who successfully prevented the train bombing incident. She begins to soften toward him and apologizes for her previous behavior. David also doesn't make a big deal out of it, and they shake hands. The next day, Julia is getting ready for an interview when her assistant accidentally spills coffee on her. David offers his shirt without hesitation, and she is moved by the gesture. Shortly after, the interview begins, and David observes Julia discussing her military plans. We see that it causes him significant stress, as it brings back his memories of the war. In the evening, when they arrive at Julia's place, she thanks David for his shirt. She also tells him that the terrorist caught on the train is going to be executed. When asked about Nadia, she reveals that she has not said anything and is still terrified. After this, Julia inquires about David's family, and he tells her that he is married with 2 children. He then asks if she has always wanted to be a politician. Julia responds that she was a criminal lawyer who decided to go into politics to address the flaws she saw in the legal system. David disagrees with many of her ideas, so she tells him that he doesn't need to vote for her. He only needs to protect her. Afterward, David returns to his house and attempts to call Vicky again. However, she doesn't answer his calls, leaving him frustrated. The following morning, he goes to see her in the hopes of reconciling, but Vicky shocks him by saying that she has already met someone new. This devastates David, and he begs her not to get divorced just yet. He tells her that if something happens to him, she could receive his pension if they are still legally married. David is giving her some dark ideas. In the following scene, David meets his friend Andy, with whom he served in the military. Andy's face is severely scarred from his time in the service, and he is also suffering from trauma. When he discovers David works for the Home Secretary, he is deeply disappointed. He scolds his friend for working for the politicians who sent them to die in the first place and caused the deaths of his comrades. David understands that Andy has a point, but doesn't say anything. The next morning, we see David dropping off his children at school. It turns out his son has developmental issues, leading to constant bullying from other kids. He refuses to go to school, but David encourages him to stand up to the bullies and inform the principal if they bother him. With no other choice, the boy reluctantly enters inside. Later, Julia and David are on their way to work when he receives repeated calls from his ex-wife. Initially, he ignores them, but when the calls keep on coming, Julia asks him to answer it. Vicky then informs him that the special school they applied to for their son doesn't have a spot for him. She's very upset, but David promises they'll find another special school for him. He then says he's at work and hangs up. When they arrive at their destination, he apologizes to Julia for taking personal phone calls, but she doesn't seem to mind. Later, at the office, Julia meets with a man who informs her about a potential terrorist attack on a school. The man tells her that it is the same school that David's children attend, which surprises her. They suspect that this operation is revenge for David's efforts to prevent the terrorist attack on the train. However, they decide not to inform the school, but instead tighten the security to avoid causing panic among people. The next morning, children are playing at the school when terrorists arrive in a white van and prepare to attack. Seeing this, a teacher quickly takes the children inside, and a police van arrives in front of the school to keep the terrorists out. They then shoot down the bad guys, causing their truck to crash. It appears that they are dead. So, an officer approaches the truck to confirm. Unfortunately, one of the terrorists is still alive, and he quickly detonates the bomb. As a result, the vehicle explodes, killing 3 officers in the process. Later, when David learns of the attack, he immediately calls Vicky and is relieved to hear that their children are safe. He is then summoned by his boss, who informs him that this act could be retaliation for the train incident. As a result, his wife and children have been relocated to a guarded shelter in case of future attacks. This makes David happy, but then his boss shocks him by revealing that he has been relieved of his duties as Julia's bodyguard and assigned a desk job. David demands to know why he's being punished, but his boss responds that because the terrorists are after him, it is too dangerous for him to be with Julia. In the end, he has no choice but to obey his superior's orders. Later, David meets up with Andy again and gets drunk. They discuss the government's response to the terror attack, and Andy remarks that Julia is simply exploiting the situation to gain more power. He asks how she would feel if she had to go through what they did. Hearing this, David is speechless as he realizes that his friend intends to harm her. The next morning, Vicky receives a letter informing her that a spot at the special school has suddenly become available. She immediately informs David, and they celebrate the news. Later, he is summoned by his boss, who informs him that he has been reinstated as Julia's bodyguard. David inquires how this happened, and she responds that he appears to have made some high-ranking friends. Hearing this, David quickly understands that it was Julia who summoned him back, and also helped with his son's school. Later, he reports for duty, and Julia says it is good to have him back. In the evening, she invites him to have dinner with her, which he accepts. They begin talking about their personal lives, and Julia reveals that she was once married. David also admits that he has been separated from his wife and is only maintaining a good relationship for the sake of their children. He thanks her for her help with his son's school situation, to which Julia responds that she entered politics to help people. The next day, Julia and David are driving to a meeting with the Prime Minister, but shortly after, someone unexpectedly fires at the car, killing the driver on the spot. David realizes that they are in danger, so he quickly springs into action and tells Julia to stay low. The bullets keep coming at the car, but he assures her that they will not penetrate the armored metal. He even holds her hand to calm her down. "The bullets won't penetrate today, but I will tonight, Mom." Following this, David calls the police and waits for reinforcements to arrive, but even after a while, no one shows up. With the sniper continuing to shoot, David takes control of the situation and starts driving. Moments later, he gets out of the car and snaps a photo of his surroundings. He soon realizes the sniper is on the roof of a nearby building and decides to go there. A terrified Julia begs him not to leave, but David assures her that nothing will happen and requests that she stay inside. Moments later, he enters the building and makes his way to the rooftop. To his surprise, he discovers that the sniper is none other than his former comrade, Andy. The latter declares that it is too late for him and asks him to complete the mission by murdering Julia. David urges him to surrender, but Andy pulls the trigger on himself and commits the unthinkable. After this incident, Julia is taken to a hotel for her safety. When David goes to meet her, she is still shaken and traumatized by what happened. She continues to cry, but David assures her that she is now safe. When their hands accidentally brush, Julia informs him that she is not a queen and that he's allowed to touch her. David then gives her a hug and tries to calm her down. In the heat of the moment, they suddenly start kissing and eventually make love. I told you, Marm. The next day, David meets with his boss, who praises him for his heroic actions and informs him that he will be recommended for commendation. She demands to know who Julia has been meeting with in the last few days and what her hidden agendas are. David is repulsed by this and believes he cannot disclose such information. However, his boss reveals that she's a dangerous politician who should be stopped at all costs. She explains that Julia was aware of the attack on the school but didn't inform him, despite knowing that his children go there. Hearing this, David is left stunned and doesn't know what to say. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.